Welcome to another deep dive. This time you handed us Clifton Chadwick's Teaching Kids to Think Critically,
Hmm.
Effective Problem Solving, and Better Decisions. Let me tell you,
It's a
it's
great
a great one. Yeah,
choice.
this book is seriously practical, and it's laid out so clearly.
It
It's 8
is.
chapters, each one building on the one before. It's like taking a
Mhm.
course in how these young minds work.
Chadwick really lays it out well, like how children learn and how we can help them
Yeah.
develop those super important critical thinking skills. It's like giving them the tools to deal with a world that's just overflowing with information and make good choices.
Right, absolutely. Okay, so let's break down these 8 chapters just so we all have a good roadmap for this deep dive.
Okay. Yeah.
Chapter 1 is the introduction. Chadwick makes the case for why critical thinking is so important, especially in today's world. He says that traditional schools don't really do a great job of teaching these skills. So parents
Right.
really need to step up, right?
Yeah.
Chapter 2, learning and the structure of knowledge. We get into how knowledge is actually structured in the brain, looking at schemes.
Yeah.
These are like mental building blocks
Yeah.
for understanding. Chapter 3 is where we start getting into the really useful stuff, the practical stuff, developing skills for effective learning. Chadwick gives us a bunch of strategies to help kids learn more effectively.
Oh, yeah. Chapter 4 is metacognition, awareness for thinking. And that is fascinating. This is all about helping kids become aware of their own thought processes.
Yeah.
It's like they get to be their own coach for learning, right? They can recognize what they know, figure out how they learn best, and then adjust if they hit a roadblock.
That's powerful. Then we hit Chapter 5, motivation. They say, right?
Yeah.
You can lead a kid to knowledge,
Yeah.
but you can't make them think. So this chapter is about that inner drive, dispositions, motivation, attitudes,
Yeah.
desire to think.
That's a great way to put it. He dives into curiosity, persistence, even building a positive self-image.
Yeah.
All those things
It's all
are so important for lifelong learning.
Absolutely. Speaking of setting kids up for success, Chapter 6 is developing and establishing intellectual standards for thinking. It's like setting high standards for how they think,
Yeah.
helping kids understand what good thinking actually looks like.
It is. And then in Chapter 7, we go into problem-solving mode.
Right.
Problem-solving skills. That's where all those schemes and strategies we were talking about earlier, those really come into play.
Yeah.
Chadwick looks at all kinds of approaches to problem-solving, like figuring out the problem and then coming up with creative solutions.
Yeah. And finally, we get to the top of the mountain, Chapter 8, high-quality critical thinking. Wrapping up, it's like tying everything together, emphasizing those traits for high-quality thinking that will help these kids learn and grow for their whole lives.
I love Chapter 1, the introduction. That one really grabs you.
Yeah.
Chadwick comes out and says that most schools don't really teach kids how to think critically.
Wow. Okay, that's a big statement. He must have some pretty serious research to back that up. What does he say about why that's such a problem?
He's got research showing that unless you really challenge kids, their thinking skills can basically stall out between 4th grade and 12th grade.
Really?
It's like a muscle. You don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah, that's a serious wake-up call.
Yeah. So he's putting a lot of emphasis on parents to kind of
If
fill in the gaps, right?
it makes sense, the world's a lot different now than it was even a few years ago. Think about it. Kids are just bombarded with information
Oh, absolutely.
from all sides.
From everywhere. It's not even just the amount of information. It's that they need to be able to analyze it and filter it and evaluate.
Exactly. You got to make sense of the world, solve problems, make good decisions.
So he's saying critical thinking is almost like a survival skill these days, right? It's not just a
Right.
nice thing to have, it's essential.
Think about it. We're always making choices based on the information we see. What to buy, where to go, who to trust.
Oh, yeah.
Without critical thinking, you can get swayed by all kinds of stuff.
Mm.
Misinformation, advertising, even peer pressure.
Just like being lost in a forest without a compass. You might wander around, but you're
Right.
probably not going to get where you need to go. How does he suggest we create this environment that encourages critical thinking, though? Is it like drilling kids with logic puzzles and flashcards?
Actually, he suggests something way more natural. He's all about everyday conversations and experiences,
Yeah.
asking open-ended questions.
Yeah.
Encourage kids to think for themselves instead of just giving them the answers.
Oh, so instead of just giving them the answer, we should prompt them to think deeper, right? Like if a kid asks, why is the sky blue?
Yeah.
Instead of like reciting the scientific reason, you ask, what do you think makes the sky blue?
Exactly.
That's interesting.
It's about sparking that curiosity, getting them to explore their own ideas.
That makes me think of something I read recently about how children are naturally curious, but
We can kind of kill that if we're not careful. So Chadwick's saying we need to be facilitators of that curiosity, not just information dispensers.
that's a great way to put it. He talks about exposing kids to all kinds of experiences too.
Yeah.
Museums, different books, even just talking about current events.
It's about broadening their horizons,
Yeah.
right? Giving them a bigger lens to see the world through, which helps them develop that critical perspective.
Absolutely. It's all about getting ready for those specific strategies that he gives later in the book.
Okay, so we have a really good reason for why critical thinking is so important, especially these days. Now, I want to jump into Chapter 2, Learning and the Structure of Knowledge, and look at these schemes.
Okay.
They sound like the foundation of understanding.
They are. This chapter is all about how our brains organize knowledge. It gets a little technical, but
Okay,
it's really important for understanding how kids learn and how we can help them build like a really strong mental framework.
okay, I'm ready to get a little nerdy. What exactly are these schemes, and how do they work?
So a scheme is like a mental framework. It helps us organize information.
Uh-huh.
Each scheme is a concept, a skill, a piece of information, like a mental file folder in your brain.
Okay, so if a child is learning about animals, they might have a scheme for dogs with things like forelegs, furry, barks.
Got it.
And as they learn more about dogs, they like add to that scheme different breeds, behaviors.
Right.
So it's always evolving. But how do these schemes connect to each other? How do they make like a bigger picture of understanding?
That's where assimilation and accommodation come in. When a child sees something new, they try to fit it into their
Oh.
existing schemes. That's assimilation.
So if they see a cat for the first time, they might think it's a dog at first
Right.
because it's also got 4 legs and fur. They're trying to put in that dog scheme.
Exactly. But as they learn more about cats, they realize that cats and dogs are different in some key ways. They meow instead of bark, they purr. Different body language.
So then they have to make a new scheme for cats, right?
Right.
They're accommodating this new information by changing their mental model.
You got it. That process of assimilation and accommodation, that's how kids build a more complex, nuanced understanding of the world. They're always taking in new information, comparing it to what they know, and then adjusting their mental models.
Sounds like active learning is really key. It's not just absorbing information, it's processing it, making connections, maybe even revising what you thought you knew.
Absolutely. That's what makes schemes so important. Knowledge isn't just a bunch of facts. It's like a network of ideas and concepts.
And the more connections we make, the stronger that network becomes,
Yeah.
right? It's like it's a scaffold that supports that deeper understanding and critical thinking.
Chadwick really pushes the point that parents and educators, they play a huge role
Yeah.
in helping kids build that scaffolding.
Yeah.
We do it by giving them rich learning experiences, asking them good questions, and getting them to connect what they're learning with the world around them.
It's not just memorizing facts. It's like helping them understand how those facts fit into the bigger picture, how they connect to other ideas, how they can actually use them in real life.
That's exactly where the magic happens. When knowledge becomes meaningful
Yeah.
and helps kids think critically and solve problems.
I love that. So they've got this really interesting framework for how knowledge is structured in our brains. Now, I'm really interested in the more practical stuff. What are some of the specific strategies Chadwick gives in Chapter 3, Developing Skills for Effective Learning?
He starts by grouping learning skills into 2 categories.
Okay.
Initial and advanced learning skills. They build on each other.
Okay. Let's start with the initial learning skills. What are those all about?
Those are the basic skills. Getting information into our brains, paying attention, repeating information, asking and answering questions.
So pretty basic, but really important.
Right. Chadwick says that even though they're simple, they're often overlooked. People don't teach them directly. For example, a lot of kids have trouble focusing their attention, and that obviously makes it hard to learn.
Yeah, it's like trying to build a house on a shaky foundation.
Yeah,
Without that focus, everything else falls apart.
exactly. But Chadwick doesn't just point out problems, he offers solutions. He suggests breaking tasks down into smaller pieces, using visuals, creating a calm and focused learning space.
So it's about setting kids up for success, right?
Mhm.
Minimize distractions, create a space where they can focus.
Exactly. And he's big on repetition.
Okay.
It might seem like old school rote learning,
Yeah.
but he says it's essential for making information stick in our memory.
So flashcards and times tables still have a place.
They do, but Chadwick says repetition works best when you combine it with other strategies. Like, instead of just repeating a list of words, encourage kids to use those words in sentences, create stories, even act them out.
It's about making it engaging, right?
Right.
Finding ways to connect information to something meaningful.
It's about going beyond just memorizing. Help kids understand what the facts actually mean.
That brings us to those advanced learning skills, the
Hmm.
ones that help us go beyond simple memorization towards, like, real understanding.
Right. These skills are about actively processing information, making connections, using what we've learned in new situations.
Okay, I'm ready for the next level. What are some of those advanced skills?
One of the most powerful techniques Chadwick talks about is elaboration. That's adding details, examples, even personal experiences to the information.
So instead of just memorizing the definition of a word, you encourage kids to think of examples of how that word is used or make up a story that uses the word.
Got it. It's about making the information more vivid, more memorable, more relevant to them. And he gives all sorts of elaboration techniques, from making mental images to connecting information to real-life events or stories.
I like that. It's like using that creative part of the brain to help with learning.
Another big one is organization. That's finding ways to structure information so it's easier to understand and remember.
So things like taking notes, making outlines, those would fall under this.
Exactly. It's about creating a mental framework for the information. Makes it easier to remember and use in different situations.
It's like a mental filing system, right?
Precisely.
Organizing information into categories so it's not just a jumbled mess in our brains.
Chadwick also talks about connecting new information to what we already know. He calls it meaningful learning.
Okay.
He says it's the key to understanding and remembering things for a long time.
So instead of treating every piece of information as, like, a separate thing, we should help kids see how it relates to other things they know, to their own experiences, to the world around them.
Exactly. It's about building those connections between different areas of knowledge, making a web of understanding that supports critical thinking and problem solving.
This is so interesting. I could already see how these strategies could be useful, not just for schoolwork, but for everything. It's about becoming a better learner in general.
It is, and Chadwick doesn't stop there. In the next chapter, he introduces metacognition, which takes learning to another level.
Okay, I'm definitely hooked. Metacognition sounds amazing. But before we get into that, I want to remind our listeners, we're just getting started with this book. There's so much more to unpack.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on these initial learning strategies? Have you tried any of them with your own kids? Share your experiences in the comments. And while you're down there, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the rest of this deep dive and all our future episodes.
And if you're enjoying this journey into critical thinking, let us know what other books you want us to cover. We're always looking for cool new ways to learn and share what we find.
So keep thinking, keep those questions coming, and join us next time as we explore metacognition, the art of thinking about thinking.
I love it. Welcome back to our deep dive into Clifton Chadwick's Teaching Kids to Think Critically. Last time we were looking at those basic skills for effective learning. Now we're moving on to metacognition.
Oh, this is where it gets really interesting. It sounds like we're taking learning to, like, a whole new level. So what exactly does Chadwick mean by metacognition?
It's basically thinking about thinking. It's being able to step back and kind of become aware of your own thought processes to understand how you learn best and to monitor your own progress.
It's like having an inner observer, right? Like someone who's watching how your mind works and giving you feedback.
Exactly. Chadwick says that this metacognitive awareness is essential for becoming independent, self-directed learners.
That makes sense. If you understand how your own mind works, you're in a much better position to, take charge of your own learning.
It's like having a map of your own learning journey. You know where you're starting, where you're going, and what routes are most likely to get you there.
And you can, like, adjust your route as you go. Right. If you run into an obstacle or find a better path.
Exactly. How do we actually help kids develop this metacognitive awareness, though? It sounds, I don't know, a little abstract.
Yeah, it does. But I'm sure Chadwick has some practical ideas. What does he suggest?
Well, he starts with modeling. He encourages parents and educators to actually think out loud about their own learning processes.
So making that inner dialogue visible. Like if you're reading with your child and you come to a word you don't know, you might say, I don't know this word. Let's see if I can figure it out from the context.
Exactly. You're showing them how you approach a problem, how you use strategies, how you check your own understanding. You're showing them that learning isn't always easy, that it's okay to struggle, and that there are ways to deal with those challenges.
It's about making it normal to struggle, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we only see the end result of learning, the aha moment, but
Yeah.
we don't see all the work and the sometimes messy process that went into it.
Exactly. Chadwick also stresses asking kids questions that get them to think about their own learning.
So not just, did you understand that? But maybe, what part of this was the hardest for you? Or what strategy did you use to figure that out?
Exactly. You want to get them to think about how they're thinking, to become more aware of their strengths and weaknesses, and to be more strategic about how they learn.
It sounds like a lot of this is about shifting the responsibility for learning from the teacher or parent to the child themselves.
It is. It's about giving kids the power to be active participants in their own learning, to take ownership of the process, and to feel like they have some control over it.
And that sense of ownership is so important for motivation. Which takes us nicely to Chapter 5.
Mm.
Dispositions, motivation, attitudes, desire to think.
It's a great chapter. It deals with the emotional side of learning. It acknowledges that even with the best strategies, kids still need that inner drive, that desire to learn, to really thrive.
I've definitely seen that. You can show a kid the information, but you can't force them to be interested. So how does Chadwick suggest we tap into that internal motivation?
He emphasizes fostering curiosity, starting by creating an environment at home where it's okay to explore and ask questions.
So make it safe to ask why and how a million times, to try things out, to make mistakes, and to learn from them.
Exactly. And expose them to a wide variety of experiences that can spark their interest. Visiting a museum, going for a nature walk, even just talking about what's happening in the world.
Look the world their classroom, right?
Yeah,
Show them that learning can happen anywhere, that it can be fun and engaging.
precisely. And Chadwick also talks about persistence, helping kids develop that grit to stick with things even when they're hard.
Oh, that's so important. I feel like we live in a world where everyone wants everything right away. But real learning takes time, effort, and a willingness to work through those struggles.
Exactly. And Chadwick encourages parents to be good role models for persistence, to show kids that it's okay to make mistakes, to struggle, to keep trying. It's about framing those challenges as opportunities for growth, not as failures.
I love that. It's about moving from a fixed mindset where you believe your abilities are set in stone to a growth mindset where you believe you can learn and improve with effort.
Right. And Chadwick also stresses the importance of building a positive self-image where kids feel confident in their ability to learn and succeed.
That makes so much sense. If you don't believe in yourself, you're less likely to take risks, to try new things, to keep going when things get tough.
Exactly. And that confidence comes from experiencing success, even small successes along the way. It's about celebrating those small wins, recognizing effort and progress, and helping kids see themselves as capable learners.
It's like that saying, success breeds success. The more small wins we have, the more confident and motivated we become to tackle bigger challenges. So we've got this internal drive, that love of learning, all fired up. But how do we make sure the thinking itself is high quality? That's where Chapter 6 comes in, right? Developing and establishing intellectual standards for thinking.
This is about setting a high bar for thinking, moving beyond just thinking to thinking well.
Okay, I'm ready to raise that bar. What are some of these intellectual standards?
Well, he starts with clarity, expressing your thoughts in a way that's easy to understand, avoiding being vague or unclear.
So teaching kids to articulate their thoughts well, to use language effectively, to make sure their message is clear and concise.
Exactly. Clarity goes hand in hand with accuracy. Chadwick stresses the importance of seeking truth, of basing your thinking on reliable information and evidence.
It's about being intellectually honest, right? Not just accepting things at face value, but digging deeper, checking your information, and making sure your thinking is grounded in reality.
Precisely. He also highlights precision, which is about paying attention to details, using specific language, and avoiding generalizations or oversimplifications.
Being very careful and accurate in your thinking, making sure your conclusions are well supported and logical.
Exactly. And then there's relevance, which means making sure your thoughts are connected to the issue at hand, avoiding things that are distracting or irrelevant.
Staying focused, keeping your thinking on track, and ensuring that your conclusions are relevant to the problem you're trying to solve.
Absolutely. And Chadwick argues that all these standards, clarity, accuracy, precision, relevance, they all work together to make our thinking better.
It's like building a house with high-quality materials and good craftsmanship. It's going to be stronger, more durable, and more beautiful than one built with cheap materials and shortcuts.
I love that analogy. And it shows that these intellectual standards aren't just abstract ideas. They're practical tools that can help us make better decisions, solve problems, and navigate the world with more confidence and clarity.
So we've built the foundation for high-quality thinking. Now I'm excited to see how those skills are used in Chapter 7, problem-solving skills.
This is where it all comes together. Chadwick takes all those thinking tools and techniques and shows us how to apply them to real-life problems.
This is what we've been building up to, right?
Yeah.
Making those abstract concepts concrete and useful in everyday life.
Exactly. And Chadwick emphasizes that problem solving isn't just a skill for school or work, it's a fundamental life skill.
It's something we do every day, whether it's figuring out how to get somewhere on time, working through a disagreement with a friend, or making a big decision.
Absolutely. And Chadwick breaks the problem solving process down into clear steps, starting with identifying the problem.
It seems obvious, but I can see how we often jump to solutions before we fully understand what we're trying to solve.
It happens all the time. We get caught up in the symptoms, the surface level stuff, without taking the time to figure out the root cause.
It's like putting a bandage on a broken leg. It might cover it up, but it's not going to fix it.
So the first step is to really define the problem. What are the specific things you're seeing? What might be causing them? What do you want to achieve?
Asking the right questions, gathering information, and making sure we really understand the challenge before we start thinking about solutions.
Exactly. And once you've identified the problem, the next step is to come up with possible solutions. Chadwick encourages us to be creative here, to think outside the box, and to consider all kinds of options.
So be open-minded, brainstorm, look at things from different perspectives, and don't dismiss anything too quickly, even if it sounds a little unusual at first.
Absolutely. Be willing to explore and try new things. Then, once you have some possible solutions, you need to evaluate them, weigh their pros and cons, and think about how effective they might be.
This is where our critical thinking skills come in, right? We have to look at each solution objectively, considering how practical it is, what the downsides might be, and how likely it is to work.
Exactly. It's about making an informed decision, choosing the solution that best balances what you want to achieve with the potential risks and challenges.
So we've defined the problem, brainstormed solutions, and evaluated how effective they might be. Now it's time to put our plan into action.
Exactly. You implement your chosen solution and see what happens.
But it's probably not always smooth sailing. What if you hit a snag, or your initial solution doesn't work out the way you thought it would?
That's where flexibility and adaptability are important. Chadwick says that problem solving is a process, a cycle of planning, implementing, evaluating, and adjusting. Your first solution isn't always going to be perfect.
So you have to be willing to adapt, learn from your mistakes, and try again. See setbacks as opportunities to learn and grow, not as failures.
Exactly. And the final step in Chadwick's process is reflection. Take some time to look back on what happened, evaluate how well your solution worked, and learn from both your successes and your mistakes.
It's like turning every problem-solving experience into a learning opportunity. What went well? What could have gone better? What would I do differently next time? How can I use these lessons for future challenges?
Exactly. Make continuous improvement a part of how you approach problems. And Chadwick says this process can be used for any problem, big or small, from fixing something around the house to making important life decisions.
It's about having a framework, a set of tools you can use whenever you face a challenge.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the final chapter, high-quality critical thinking. Wrapping up. It's like the culmination of everything we've talked about, where Chadwick ties it all together and stresses the importance of cultivating a love of learning and critical thinking throughout life.
It is a really great chapter, isn't it? It
Yeah.
feels like the culmination of everything we've learned.
Absolutely.
And Chadwick really stresses how critical thinking is not just like a set of skills.
Right.
It's a way of being
It's a way of life, yeah.
in the world.
We've talked so much about the, mechanics of thinking,
Yeah.
And now it feels like we're moving into the character,
The disposition,
Yeah,
part of it.
the heart of it. What does it mean to be a critical thinker? He says that to really think critically, you need more than just, smarts.
Mhm.
It takes certain intellectual virtues, habits of mind, that actually guide our thinking and our actions.
These are the character traits, right, that allow that critical thinking to actually flourish. Not
Yeah.
just in school, but in life.
In life, yeah. That's it.
What are some of those virtues that Chadwick talks about?
One of the biggest ones is intellectual humility.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that we don't know everything, being open to new ideas, new perspectives, even admitting when we're wrong.
It's about being able to say, I don't know,
Yeah.
or I might be wrong about this.
Yeah.
Having the courage to, like, question what you believe
Yeah.
and be open to changing your mind when you see new evidence.
That's it.
It's humbling for sure.
It is.
But I think it's, like, crucial for growth.
It is.
Right? Without it, you get stuck in your own little world
Yeah, exactly.
and miss out on how big and complex everything really is.
Yeah. It reminds me of that quote, I think it's Socrates, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing."
Oh, I love that one.
It's about approaching learning with a sense of wonder
Yeah.
and curiosity, knowing there's always more to learn.
Always more. Absolutely.
Chadwick also talks about intellectual courage.
Okay.
That's about being willing to challenge your own beliefs, to look at truths that make you uncomfortable, and to stand up for what you believe in, even when it's not popular.
So it's about having the guts to think for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? To question authority.
Yes.
To say what you believe, even when it's hard or people don't like it.
That's it.
It's about being firm in your convictions, even when you're facing pushback.
And often that goes with intellectual empathy.
Okay.
Being able to understand different points of view, even if you don't agree with them.
This is so important now, I think, when it's so easy to just stay in your own little bubble
Right.
and just dismiss anyone who thinks differently.
Yeah.
Intellectual empathy asks us to, like, step outside ourselves and try to see things from other people's perspectives.
That's where the good conversations happen.
Right.
You build understanding.
Yeah.
You find common ground.
Even if you still disagree.
Even if you disagree, yeah.
It sounds like Chadwick is describing a critical thinker who's not just smart,
Right.
but also compassionate and open-minded and courageous.
That's it, exactly.
And he says that these virtues, you don't just, like, have them.
You cultivate them. It
Yeah.
takes practice, reflection. They're habits that you can build and strengthen over time.
It's encouraging to think that, we can actively work on these things.
We can choose to cultivate these virtues.
Yeah.
Be more humble,
Yeah.
more courageous,
Yeah.
more empathetic.
Absolutely. It's about making critical thinking part of who you are.
Yes.
It's about your values, your beliefs, how you act.
He reminds us that it's not just about, like, knowing stuff.
Right.
It's about using what you know to make the world better. It's about being a responsible citizen, making ethical choices, being a caring person.
Yeah. It's about using those skills not just to help yourself,
Right.
but to help others too.
Exactly.
That's a powerful message to end on.
It is.
This whole book has been so enriching,
Yeah.
I feel like I have this whole new perspective on learning and thinking and problem solving.
Me too.
I feel like I have a whole new toolbox for approaching not just education, but life.
I hope our listeners are feeling that way too.
Yeah, me too. This conversation doesn't have to end here, though. We want to hear from you.
Yes.
What really stood out to you from Chadwick's book? What are your aha moments?
What are you going to try in your own life or with your kids?
Share your thoughts in the comments. We love hearing from you and learning from your perspectives. And if you're loving this deep dive into critical thinking, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes.
And tell us, what book should we do next? What are you curious about? What topics would you like us to explore?
We're always looking for new adventures and learning, so keep those minds curious. Keep talking to each other, and remember, learning never stops. See you next time.